Gender segregation in academia has been an unfortunate reality throughout the history and philosophy of science. Scholars have realized that mentorships in fields which are perceived as more difficult often subtly discourage women from pursuing science at both undergraduate and graduate levels. Many women have been underappreciated and unknown for pivotal scientific discoveries, as opposed to their male counterparts. I'm Alana from Boston College, and today we're discussing the role of Rosalind Franklin in the path to the double helix and why it's important to create an inclusive academic community in the sciences. Major developments in molecular biology during the 20th century all sought to answer two important questions. What is the relationship between proteins and nucleic acids in the copying and transmission of genetic information, and how is the genetic information encoded in the chemical substance DNA expressed in the process of gene action? The central issue of study became the structure of DNA itself. Determining its 3D structure was the goal of X-ray crystallographers and structural chemists in the 1950s, which is where the race to the double helix begins.
But first, let's ask real BC students about the underrepresentation of women in science and Rosalind Franklin. Did you take biology in high school?
I did.
Okay. Did you take biology in college?
No. High school.
High school. High school.
Just high school.
Okay.
I'm taking it right now.
Taking ecology and evolution at BC, and I'm planning on taking I'm doing the biology minor, so there'll be lots more biology coming.
Do you know the names Watson and Crick and their contribution to science?
I recognize them, but it was junior year and I can't remember exactly.
Okay.
I remember their names from freshman biology, but I don't remember what they did.
Yes, the double helix.
The double helix structure of DNA.
Yep.
They discovered the double helix structure of DNA.
I remember they had things to do with DNA, supposedly in the discovery, but really it was the other lady whose name I cannot remember right now.
So you've heard of Rosalind Franklin?
Yes, that's the one.
Yes.
What do you know about her?
She was the one whose information they used to find out the double helix structure. I think she used the crystallography.
In 1950, Rosalind Franklin was granted a fellowship at King's College for her expertise in X-ray crystallography. Franklin was hired to work on DNA fibers along molecular biologist Maurice Wilkins with PhD student Raymond Gosling as her assistant. She refined the cameras used in the lab, and in May 1952, she and Gosling took photo 51 of the B form of DNA, the most critical evidence to support its double helical structure. Structural chemists James Watson and Francis Crick were also working on the DNA problem by building 3D models. Wilkins showed Watson and Crick photo 51 from Franklin's private notes without her permission. Checking with Franklin's precise measurements, Watson and Crick drew up a model compatible with her experimental data in 1953. Two sugar phosphate backbones twisted together on the outside with flat hydrogen-bonded nucleotide base pairs forming the core. Franklin's work was crucial to this discovery, but it is hotly contested whether or not she would have come to this conclusion on her own with the evidence she had collected. Franklin's portrayal in history after her early death is also a subject of controversy. James Watson made her the antagonist Rosie in his sensational novel The Double Helix, where he writes, "Clearly Rosie had to go or be put in her place," and "The best home for a feminist was in another person's lab." Her personal friend Anne Sayre came to her defense, pointing to Franklin's strong sense of vocation toward science and depicting a close-minded boys' club picture of kings. Decades later, biographer Brenda Maddox addressed the myth of Franklin as the Sylvia Plath of molecular biology, claiming that she had found a more attractive, capable woman than Watson had suggested, and a King's College more congenial and welcoming to women scientists than Sayre had allowed. Who was the real Rosalind Franklin? She was born in London in 1920 to a Jewish family, and from an early age they described her as alarmingly clever and very serious. Franklin was a competitive student who eventually earned a PhD from Cambridge in 1945 for her extensive research on the molecular qualities of coal. Franklin continued to use crystallography in her research of both RNA and the polio virus at BIRKBECK College, working until her death from ovarian cancer in 1957. While her research on coal and viruses were appreciated during her lifetime, Franklin received little credit for her role in the discovery of the double helix until after her death. Watson, Crick, and Wilkins shared the 1962 Nobel Prize for the discovery, but Franklin was left out because the Nobel Committee does not make posthumous nominations. However, Franklin should be remembered as more than a wronged heroine. She was a passionate, assertive, and intelligent woman who dedicated her life to her work and followed her dream of being a scientist despite social and scholastic barriers. But why are women in general underrepresented in elite academic science? In 2005, 2 professors in the Harvard Psychology Department had 2 different explanations for this issue. Professor Steven Pinker argued that there are sex differences in cognitive abilities, presenting data that claimed men have conceptual abilities which predisposes them to STEM fields. On the other hand, Professor Elizabeth Spelke argued that there is no biological difference, and instead, deep-seated discrimination and discouragement explains why women don't have a stronger presence in these fields. What do BC students think about this debate?
First of all, the spatial awareness thing is wrong.
Women are still given equal opportunity to go into these fields. It's just that maybe they don't choose to go into these fields because they are more male representative. You've seen as a kid and how you've grown up with that.
I hate being in like a male-dominated classroom of anything. It doesn't even have to be science. It could be any class whatsoever. I always get like more anxious speaking out. I feel, maybe just because I used to be in an all-girls school, maybe that's it, but I always feel like I don't want to look stupid, particularly in front of the guy.
An issue of it being guy-centric and then women being excluded from that, maybe not even on purpose, but just because of the nature of the field.
Well, coming from an all-girls school, that kind of helps take those barriers away. In the same way I think in an all-boys school, it takes away the barriers for the men doing like English and history.
I think the social structures have inhibited just women's general knowledge of science, which I think is unfortunate, but today there's no excuse.